It's finally time to... I've been engrossed in the Dark Knight trilogy for the past few days, so today, with the Batman right at the door, it's time to finally talk about The Dark Knight Rises. 8 years after Batman assumes the responsibility of the death of District Attorney Harvey Dent, he encounters the mysterious Selina Kyle and the villainous Bane, a new terrorist leader who overwhelms Gotham City, and so the Dark Knight resurfaces to protect the city that has branded him an enemy. But before I properly start with my review today for The Dark Knight Rises, I want you to start the conversation in the comments below with all your thoughts on the film. Feel free to talk spoilers. This review will have spoilers as it has had so far for the entire Dark Knight trilogy. And if you like movies and TV, this is the place to be, so consider clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss any future conversation on your favorite movies and TV. And for the past 10 years, I still remember at the time I didn't have a channel, but I already watched a ton of the OG movie reviewers. And when this film came out, everyone freaking loved The Dark Knight Rises. And for the past few years, it has grown somewhat divisive. Not maligned, I think that would be unfair to say, but it has been divisive, where some people still really love it, and other people have grown a bit cold on it. I'm on the former side. To this day, I love this film. Not without its flaws. There are certainly some things that let it down, but as the finale to this grandiose trilogy, telling the story of the Batman, this caps everything off, at least on an emotional and thematic levels, beautifully. First of all, there's a clear continuation from the first two stories where you feel the weight of the history of each and every one of these characters, but also of the world they live in, the experience that they have gone through collectively, and the experiences of this city that they've so clearly established as a character in its own right. There's a clear sense of stakes, a clear sense of weight and consequences of those stakes, of what is at play. There is also an immense escalation of the events from the previous two movies that feed into this one. But most importantly, for me, as someone who loves this character, as someone who loves to look at these trilogies as this one big continuous story, there is one incredible sense of finality to it all, where it feels right, where the characters begin in Batman Begins and where they end up in this film, it feels right, it feels earned, it feels justified. And one of the aspects of the film that clearly shows that is in the character of Bruce Wayne / Batman himself, where there's one line where he's fighting with Bane for the first time. We'll get to that fight in a second, where Bane says, "I was wondering what would break first." I really love to do Bane's voice, please indulge me. He says, "Your spirit or your body." And I love that when this film begins, Batman's spirit has already been broken. And that's what he's fighting against. He's trying to be Batman while he has lost sense of what Batman is. Meeting Bruce Wayne as this broken shell of a man that has not taken up that mantle in 8 years. He can barely stand up for himself, he can barely fight, he has a ton of these bodily injuries, but his spirit is so much worse, his morale is so much lower than it has ever been. And so I find it beautiful that it's necessary for this guy, this broken man that has created this symbol throughout his journey, that has given hope to so many people of his city. And now it's one of those people, one of the people that believe in him, that now has to motivate him, to bring him back, to become that symbol again. And I think because of that, the character of John Blake, Robin, gets a bad rap. I like that he's kind of this audience character. He's this character that is trying to motivate Bruce Wayne because he knows to become Batman again, to be Batman again. Be what you set out to be. Don't just be the man. Be the symbol. But I also love that, like all of the previous movies and most Christopher Nolan movies, his characters are immensely complex. So it's not just a pep talk that truly brings Bruce Wayne back. He's got his basic capabilities that he's had before, but when he comes face to face with a villain like Bane, who not only is this big mastermind, but he's the first big physical challenge for the Batman, which connects to one of the film's big themes, where each of the films in the Dark Knight trilogy has had a big theme. The first and begins being fear, overcoming that fear and inspiring hope in the city. The second one with Joker being chaos, obviously, order versus chaos. This one is pain. The entire film is an examination on pain, in many ways physical, of course, but more importantly, spiritual. The spiritual pain, the wear and tear of the entire history of this trilogy, and the toll that it has taken on these characters through the first two movies, through the 80 years between The Dark Knight and this film. It puts their vulnerability on the forefront, where this broken man that feels like he has this responsibility to represent this symbol of hope that is unshakable and invulnerable, but in truth, it's his body, and he is, at the end of the day, just a man. He is a man with limitations that needs to be reminded of what Batman is, and so I love his journey and the ups and downs that it takes him in, where he once again meets a reason to be Bruce Wayne without the Batman. In realizing what the Batman actually is, he does leave that mantle to someone else. He's able to push that part of himself away from his person and trust it to someone else. And that is, to me, what this Batman has always been and what he has always struggled with. And so it's a beautiful ending that he comes to in this trilogy. And one of the things that I love about this film is that in universe, it clearly understands the weight, the significance of Batman. When he first returns on the Batpod, on that chase in the highway after the stock market goes down, the score swelling up, the big fiery bat on the bridge, when he goes and helps Gordon, when he's walking on the thin ice, and even when he returns to Selina Kyle, I love that he doesn't confront her as Batman. He confronts her as Bruce Wayne. He's trusting her after she learned his identity through Bane, to show her that there is someone she herself can trust, paving the way for that way out by the end of the film. On another character's level, Bane, played by Tom Hardy. I have always loved this villain, and even in rewatching this film to prepare for this review, I love him. He's incredible in this role. Like we talked about, this is the first big physical challenge for the Batman. Bane, however, is his equal when it comes to the mental side of things. Bane is an equal mastermind to the Batman, but when it comes to pure, brutal strength, Bane is the first real big challenge that the Batman has faced. And Tom Hardy plays this role so well, where he's constantly so sure of himself. The dialogue that they gave him is astounding. He's just absolutely so quotable, which makes us as an audience kind of endear to him, where he says all these philosophical musings that make sense, particularly in the context of this world where Bane goes out of his way to expose the lies from Batman, from Commissioner Gordon, the lies of Harvey Dent, and he lets out the prisoners and they take Gotham hostage, kind of reminiscing of the No Man's Land storyline, where Gotham gets detached from everything else in the United States, where they blow up the bridges and hold Gotham apart from everything else, not letting anyone leave. Bane is 100% menacing, imposing, and commanding. He shows up on screen and you feel the power kind of emanating from him, from that introduction scene with the plane that is shot in only a way Christopher Nolan can. It's just an absolute incredible introduction to this villain that then throughout this film keeps outsmarting everything and anyone, and he is ruthless. When Gordon gets away, he just shoots one of his guys to go after him with the tracker, and then he just seems to have his hands on every pot, where he's using someone to get to a certain point and then he doesn't need them anymore. So he uses every single person to send a message, like even Dr. Pavel that he saves at the beginning of the film, and then he keeps him alive just enough so he can prepare the bomb, and then he kills him in front of everyone to install panic. Just every frame that has him on screen is purely about intimidation and control, and he is extremely successful at that. Just a great villain to cap off this trilogy that has constantly had great villains, and I love how they connect him back to the origins of the League of Shadows and therefore the origins of Batman. This is a guy that has had the same training. You think the darkness is your ally? Again, I love doing the voice, forgive me. I also want to talk about Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, and I will also talk about her and what the character kind of represents in the context of the film when it comes to my issues, but I've always thought she did a really great job with this role. I really love that first meetup between Bruce Wayne and her at the ball after she steals the pearls, where they have this exchange that is really enlightening about what her character is in the context of this film, where she comes from a place with no wealth, where she came from nothing, but she kind of took this similar arc to Bruce Wayne, where he's come from wealth and riches. He has never had a struggle growing up as a person, but she came from the slums of Gotham. So what if Bruce Wayne had that growing up? And I think she really represents what the Batman could have been had their circumstances be different. My favorite part, however, of this dance that they have that's very sultry, very seductive, is that when she asks him, "Where's your mask? Why aren't you disguised?" And he says he's disguised as Bruce Wayne, eccentric billionaire. And I love that, because it clearly shows through their journey, and we've seen it throughout all the three movies, that Bruce Wayne is the mask. Batman is the persona. But that persona is being carried out, is being embodied by this man that has limitations. But I also love that she goes on this journey of learning to be selfless, of learning not to lash out at the world, starting to learn that the world doesn't necessarily have anything against her. It was just circumstances. And so it's kind of this beautiful thing where these two characters find a way out through one another, and they find the help they kind of need, the motivation they need to keep going. Continuing on with characters, I also love Alfred in this film, where he's been carrying this weight of the secret that he's kept from Bruce for 8 years. And I think this is the best performance Michael Caine has given as Alfred, and I think Alfred has never had such a meaty role in this trilogy. And Michael Caine goes hard in every single scene he has with Bruce Wayne, where he's trying to convince him, you can't keep doing this, you're going to die, and you just feel that love, their nurturing relationship that we've always witnessed a little bit throughout this trilogy. But now this is just a desperate father trying to save his son from certain death. That final scene, even when he's at the funeral, and we have this little slight turn that then reveals Martha and Thomas's graves, and he's desperately talking to them, I failed you, I'm so sorry. Michael Caine goes hard in it. I'm having chills just thinking about this scene. And we'll talk about in a little bit how Nolan just in general caps off this film and this trilogy in such an emotionally potent way that really nails where these characters started and where they came to a head. Which not only leaves me to talk about Jim Gordon and through him kind of the city of Gotham in this film, where in the last film they were left to decide for themselves what would happen, what would the destiny of the city be. But in this one, they're completely held against their will and they have to fight back. They have to find that will, that fire within them to stand up against this terrorist attack that they're being a victim of. And I love how the film clearly establishes from the beginning how the city has been and still is divided on their opinion of the Batman. When in seeing Batman's returns, his actions throughout this film, and even through the truth coming out through Bane as he releases all the prisoners from Blackgate, and they finally stand up, it's just so gratifying to see Gotham City fighting alongside with the Batman. That entire scene where it's the policeman versus Bane and the prisoners and his soldiers, just pure bliss. Just completely seeing this beautiful arc of a city that didn't know if they could trust him, and they probably still don't, but they see what this Batman has done for their city ever since he came up. And Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon, like, this is the magnum opus of Gordons, at least that we have so far. It's so great to see him in such an active role where he almost dies at the beginning and he's struggling to kind of have the same fight as Batman. He kind of has a similar coming up throughout this film. I love the finale that they give to Batman and Gordon in this film, and how beautiful it is, how it captures the entire trilogy, how it puts this new perspective on it, and the way they do it, the exchange that Batman and Gordon have is beautiful, and it's meaningful. There is weight to that exchange, how someone doing something so simple as putting this quote on this little boy, and look what that little boy became. And it kind of represents how Gordon was always the Batman to Batman, kind of in the context of this film. And so there's a sort of reassurance in that, in Batman giving him that truth before he goes off to dispose of the bomb. It has always really hit me at the heartstrings how Gordon has always seen the Batman as this symbol of purity that he can always count on. But if it wasn't for Gordon himself, the Batman kind of wouldn't have that compass of morality for himself. So this exchange before the Batman departs and Gordon realizes who Batman is, it is my single favorite scene in this entire trilogy. Now, my favorite action sequence that we talked about in The Dark Knight, but this is my favorite scene overall. There is honestly so much to like about The Dark Knight Rises. On a character level, the action is overall an improvement where you can see some really nice choreography, not only from the Batman, not only from Bane, which is just this brutal punch, brawly kind of fighting. Catwoman herself, she gets a ton of really cool choreography to play with. It's just the shooting of it that is not very flourish. There is no pomp and circumstance to it. There is no kinetic upping of the pace. There is no different energy in the action sequences than there is in everything else, which now leads me into my issues. And again, the action sequences are just not shot that particularly well or memorably, and that is because Christopher Nolan does not have a second unit. He shoots everything himself, which actually I deeply respect. And as a director, I can understand. I want to shoot every single thing that is in my movie. That's great. But at least try to learn a little bit how to shoot action sequences. It's not his wheelhouse. It's not his comfort zone. So again, I think we've seen a betterment of action in his movies since The Dark Knight Rises. But it still is an issue I have with this film, where in a Batman film, the action has never quite been stellar when Christopher Nolan did it. Out of all the things that are stellar in his Dark Knight trilogy, Unfortunately, the action has never been one of those. And one thing that has also never quite been great in the Dark Knight trilogy is love interests and female characters overall. Despite her minute role in the series, I think the best female character in these movies has been Martha Wayne. Catwoman, Selina Kyle, I like what she represents. I think Anne Hathaway plays the role really well, but I don't believe in her as a love interest for Bruce. I don't believe in her as this kind of saving grace for him that he falls in love with after all this trauma, and even in this film he sleeps with Talia al Ghul, not knowing she's Talia al Ghul, of course, but I just don't buy that. I wish he had been in the other movies, and I wish he had known all along and they had this kind of flirtatious relationship that they have in the comics, and only now it has come to a head, where if they presented this perspective of, oh, I've never seen her this way, but because she's such a reverse of him, because they come from these different circumstances but kind of go down the same path of becoming a hero out, he becomes a hero for the city, she becomes a hero for herself, and she learns to have this selfless attitude toward life, and he learns to be a little bit selfish for himself and can be Bruce Wayne again. I just wish I could buy the romance a little bit more. Furthermore, Talia al Ghul, it's not necessarily a problem with her. I have my issues with a proper death moment, not even death scene. I think she plays all that really well. It's just the proper dying. That is just, why didn't we have another take? Because Marion Cotillard is an incredible actress. Christopher Nolan is an incredible director. And we never took a second look at that. It's weird. It's weird. My biggest issue with Talia al Ghul, however, is that she kind of makes Bane seem unimportant. She kind of makes him look like the muscle, where that's clearly not the case. Where he's clearly commending everything and orchestrating everything throughout the film to her whim, sure, but even upon that reveal that she is Talia al Ghul, I love how thematically that connects to the whole trilogy, connects to Bane, the whole reveal of who was the protector and who was the child that escaped the pit, and that in itself is an amazing sequence. Not only the child escaping the pit, but Bruce Wayne learning to escape the pit as well. We didn't talk about that, so there it is. But it just doesn't feel right, even to the point where Bane is not the final boss to be taken down, and even when he is taken down, it's not Batman that takes him down, it's Catwoman to the side. And that just doesn't feel right. It's like in the last film where I felt like the Joker and Batman confronting each other was like the scene to end it off, the finale. Emotionally, thematically, narratively, that was the crescendo the film came to. And this doesn't even have that going for it. This is just Bane suddenly shot off and killed by a supporting character that I have my own issues with. As I said, The Dark Knight Rises has a ton of stuff not only to like, to love. The qualities of this film are just as good, if not sometimes better, than the two previous films in this trilogy. There are just some lows that are as low as this franchise has ever gotten. Emotionally speaking, those final 7 minutes with the grandiose score from Hans Zimmer, which is my particular favorite score inside this trilogy, is just the cherry on top. Having Alfred seeing Bruce Wayne in Florence so he can have that security, that assurity that his son is safe and he's happy and he's let all his demons go. That is beautiful, and that is just chef's kiss. The Dark Knight Rises is an epic, stirring spectacle, an ambitious cap-off to a grandiose trilogy. It's not perfect, but it feels grand, it feels earned, and most importantly, it feels satisfying. I'm giving The Dark Knight Rises an A-. But those are only my thoughts on The Dark Knight Rises, so I want you to start the conversation about it in the comments below. Did I forget anything that you really liked, you really disliked? Drop it all down there. Thank you so much for watching, for joining me in this run through the Nolan trilogy in preparation for The Batman. And of course, if you like what you saw here, make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future conversation in your favorite movies and TV. And thank you to my channel members Bruna and Stuart for making this video possible. And I'll be back very soon with more reviews, including The Batman. And so until the next one, love each other and love the movies.